Here's Gilgeous-Alexander. McCollum staying with him. Spins, gets inside. Left-handed off the glass. Oh, what a sweet move.
Giddey, tough spot. Backdoor. What a pass. What a play. And J-Dub picks the pocket of Trae Young. He'll take it himself.
This is Lou Dort. You're listening to the Uncontested.
What is up, Thunder fans, and welcome to the Uncontested Postgame Podcast edition. I am your host for tonight, Tayler Peterson. You can find me on Twitter and all social media at Taylor_P15. And most importantly, you can find us at the _Uncontested on all social media platforms. YouTube, Facebook, X.com, you name it, we're there. And like I mentioned, we're really working on our YouTube content, so be sure to subscribe there, follow along, because we're posting a lot of stuff right there, a lot of stuff there right now. So we'd greatly appreciate that as well. If you don't already, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and leave us a 5-star rating. It'd be greatly appreciated. We are a proud part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. All that aside, the Thunder lose a very close game, 128-123 against the Sacramento Kings. A lot to break down this one. It was a frustrating game in a lot of ways. I understand why a lot of Thunder fans are frustrated. At the same time, it was a very winnable game. I think I tweeted out from the podcast account that it was a tough game, but that's very vague, because I think when you think of a tough game, like it could be a tough loss if the Thunder didn't play well and get like blown out. That wasn't necessarily the case for this one. Like I mentioned, the Thunder lose very narrowly, 128-123 in Sacramento. Something about the Thunder playing in Sacramento against the Kings, they have not performed very well, particularly when it comes to shooting. So, and we'll obviously get into that. My guys, shout out to all of you guys and gals in the live stream. My guy Smoot is already giving me a hard time. Taylor, hosting means it's a 2-hour pod. That's exactly right. Buckle in. It's midnight here, Central Time. We're going to go till 2 a.m. until the wheels fall off. A lot to break down here. I promise it won't actually be a 2-hour podcast, but there is certainly a lot to break down. I'm not even going to do a game by game or a quarter by quarter breakdown, because it's not really worth it. But just some overall stats here, I think, before we get into some of my big themes of the game. And once again, thank you all for tuning in already. A lot of good comments in the chat. Keep them coming. Give me some questions. I really appreciate it. I'll be sure to go through them and address them all as we get through the podcast here. So keep those questions coming. But like I mentioned, obviously 128-123, Kings beat OKC. SGA with 43 points. He just cannot seem to get over that 44-point career high. It's really crazy. He's tied it so many times, it feels like, over the past 2 seasons. Cannot quite get over that hump. But 43 points, 6, sorry, let me go back to the box score here. 6 rebounds, 9 assists, 13 of 27 from the floor, which is just absolutely absurd. We're going to get into that some. And 16 of 18 from the free throw line. Josh Giddey, just a phenomenal game from him. We'll get into that as well. Why is this not updating here? He had 18 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, plus 3 steals. Again, just a phenomenal Giddey game. I can't wait to break that down as well. And then Dort with 17 points, 4 rebounds. Chet 14 and 10, which just seems so crazy to me because Chet had a very quiet game. I'm going to break that down as well. But it's kind of crazy to me when I look at that box score and see that he had 14 and 10, because it certainly not feel that way. The big thing here is that OKC cut a 14-point fourth quarter deficit to 2 and had multiple opportunities to get the lead there. There was 3 opportunities, particularly down the stretch, where they had wide open 3-point attempts. Chet had 2 wide open 3-point attempts, and then Isaiah Joe had another one. They just cannot get them to fall, and it was really frustrating. But regardless, here we are. And like I said, there's a lot of big themes here to break down the game, regardless of some of those big box scores that I just mentioned, that the Thunder were unable to pull this one off. And it's a really good Sacramento Kings team. And I think that's kind of maybe one of the biggest things I want to just kind of touch on here before we actually dive into some of these themes, is that I understand a lot of the frustration. I had a lot of frustration, a lot of those frustrating tweets that I fired off from the account. But like I said, it was a tough loss. That doesn't mean it was a bad loss. And I think that's where maybe some Thunder fans are getting a little, they're letting their emotions get the best of them here. I thought the Thunder played, they put themselves in a position to win the basketball game. And unfortunately, as we'll get into with some of these themes, like, for example, the shooting, on both sides of the floor, the Kings were just absolutely lights out. The Thunder were not able to knock down shots when it mattered the most. And ultimately, that's kind of what led to this outcome. So, like I mentioned, that fourth quarter, which is kind of crazy, the Thunder were down by 14 at one point and just kind of felt like it was over. And yet, once again, we've talked about this over the past couple of seasons. The Thunder, like the Goonies, they never say die. And they continue to be able to respond to adversity. And I think that's something really positive to take from this game as well. So we'll get into some of these bigger themes here, but if I can find them, sorry, I'm going, okay. So apologies, a little flustered because I had some technical difficulties. My MacBook does not like me at all right now. And so it actually logged me out of our streaming site that we use here on the Uncontested. And so not only was it a late game here for us Thunder fans watching in the Central Time Zone, and even those of you overseas in the Eastern Time Zone, but then I had technical difficulties trying to log in and get this thing fired up. But we're here nonetheless. Let's just go ahead and dive into some of these big themes. Like I mentioned, I think the biggest theme of them all was Josh Giddey. This was his best game of the season, in my opinion. 18 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, and a team high plus 11. Plus minus was plus 11, which, and we always talk about the disclaimer there, but I think that's extremely telling of his impact on the floor, on both ends of the floor for this Thunder team. 8 of 14 from the field and 2 of 3 from 3. 2 of those were significant. I thought he started out really strong there in the first quarter. Again, on both ends of the floor, he made some bad decisions there in the second quarter. It was not his best. We kind of saw him. I don't know. I want to say the boo again. Something else to mention with Josh Giddey. He was booed yet again in an opposing arena against when he was in Sacramento. And first quarter, it didn't really faze him. I thought he came out firing. I mean, he was extremely aggressive, making the right reads, but also was getting to the rim. And I don't know. I think that was really significant, and it kind of showed his growth here over the past couple of games after he's really struggled. However, that second quarter, we saw him get stuck down low, make a ridiculous turnover. He was trying to kick out to, I can't remember who it was in the corner, but just it kind of regressed back to the Giddey that we've seen over the past, I almost said past couple of games, or really the past 5 to 10 games. And I was a little concerned there. But the third quarter happens. He has a 10-point third quarter, 4 of 6 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3. It just was significant. Josh Giddey was a huge reason that the Thunder were able to weather the extremely hot shooting from the Sacramento Kings. And then he had some huge shots in the fourth, like I mentioned, including a finish in transition there when it really mattered. And another big time 3. That was his second 3-point shot of the game. Just really, really big time moments there for Giddey in the fourth quarter when it mattered the most. But most importantly, something that we really have wanted to see from Giddey, not just spacing the floor, and obviously he didn't do a ton of that necessarily tonight, but he really competed defensively tonight. And I think that's incredibly important. Like I mentioned, that first quarter particularly, he has some big time plays, but also in the fourth quarter. And that's the reason I think that we saw Daigneault stick with him and close the game with him, which that's the first time we've seen Giddey close the game. And I didn't pull this up. Like I mentioned, has some technical difficulties. It's already a late post-game podcast, but man, I can't even remember the last time Josh Giddey closed a game, and he absolutely deserved it tonight. And he did. Daigneault rode with him. He closed the game, and rightfully so. Like I mentioned, he had an incredibly huge impact on this game. Cannot say enough about Josh Giddey. I thought he had a great game, and I just really hope this momentum carries in, into the coming games, obviously, but he's able to ride that momentum and kind of overcome some of this adversity, not just off the floor, obviously, but just even on the floor. We've talked so much about that. We saw Giddey struggle early on last season, and he was able to snap out of that. And so hopefully a game like tonight is kind of a kickstart for Josh Giddey, because as we've mentioned so much, I've mentioned this on this podcast, I know it's really frustrating seeing Josh struggle and seeing the starting lineup and the lack of spacing with Shai. We'll get into that here tonight as well. But when Josh is playing at this level, that unlocks so many different things for this team. For example, the Kings were playing a very interesting and a really, honestly, a great game plan by Mike Brown, where they were playing like almost they were playing a zone defense there for the majority of the game. They were bringing defenders, point of attack defenders up on mainly Shai, but all ball handlers were trapping up top. That creates opportunities for a player like Josh Giddey to be able to flash to the high post and be able to create for teammates. And we saw a lot of that. Rather, Josh was attacking the rim, and that resulting in him being able to get opportunities in regards to scoring, but also just being able to create for others. Unfortunately, his teammates were not able to knock down the shots, which I will continue to get into here tonight, that he was able to create for them. But when you have a player like Josh who's able to create like that, and you're able to flash him up to the high post, that's how you beat zone defenses, especially like the one that the Thunder faced tonight against the Sacramento Kings, where they were trapping up high almost every single possession, especially when Shai had the ball. But that leads me to my next big point. Shai dominated despite having zero floor spacing tonight. Shai was just absolutely phenomenal. Let's see, 43 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, 13 and 27 from the floor. But the biggest thing here is he was 16 of 18 from the free throw line. We talked about, early on the struggles that Shai was having getting to the line. He wasn't necessarily getting a lot of those calls, but tonight he absolutely was. We've kind of, and even over the past couple of games, I think we've kind of seen this regression to the mean. If you take the last couple of seasons into consideration, Shai's getting to the free throw line again. He's getting those calls. And I think the biggest thing is he's not leaving it up to interpretation. They aren't questionable calls. I mean, he is driving to the rim, and he is making sure that those refs are going to be calling those foul calls. And for him to be able to knock down 16 of 18 from the free throw line was just significant for this team. It's significant for this game. Like the Thunder being able to shoot like they did from the free throw line, even when they were struggling so poorly, scoring from outside, is really what kept them in this game all along. But just not enough to be said about Shai and his offensive game tonight when he has zero floor spacing. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Thunder don't have floor spacing on this team, but tonight there was zero contribution from outside. And the fact that Shai was 1 point away from his career high, again, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, creating for others. And I think there was a lot of talk, again, on X.com, which you probably should never look into too much and give too much credence there. But I thought Shai made the right reads there down the stretch when he was being double teamed, rather than just relentlessly attacking the rim and trying to get those foul calls and just being, I don't know. I thought he made the right reads a lot of time there in the fourth quarter. And I understand the frustrations that he wasn't being as aggressive as he was earlier in the game, but he was looking for teammates. He made the right read every time. Unfortunately, his teammates weren't really able to knock down those shots, which, again, before we get there, again, another really good defensive game, I think, overall from Shai. He didn't necessarily play like his best game in regards to like one-on-one defense, his perimeter defense that we've seen so much from him throughout the majority of the season thus far. But he had an additional 2 steals, which seems kind of crazy. It feels like he has a lot more than that, but that's because of the deflections that he had. And ultimately, I thought he had another really solid defensive game. The fact that he had another 2 steals, I think he's averaging, it's like, I don't have this pulled up. He's averaging 2+ steals per game. Like, that's just absolutely absurd for a player to have 43 points, 1 point away from his career high, to just be doing a little bit of all of it, willing his team to ultimately what he hoped was a victory, and to be able to perform on both sides of the basketball floor. I mean, it's phenomenal. We even saw Mark Daigneault sub him in there in the fourth quarter, I think with I think it was 9 minutes left. Shai, let's see, 38 minutes for Shai. The next highest player in terms of minutes was Lou Dort with 32 minutes. Shai played the majority of the game, and for him to have that impact on the floor cannot be, overstated enough. I really don't think. Shai's just been phenomenal and really tried to lead his team to victory. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, his teammates weren't able to help him out much outside of Josh Giddey. That kind of leads me to my next point here: the 3-point shooting discrepancy. The Thunder missed open shots, and they played pretty poor defense overall. For a team that really prides themselves on the defensive end of the floor, they weren't getting stops. They were leaving shooters wide open, and there's so much that goes into that. But just reading off the stats here, the Thunder were 11 of 36 from three compared to 18 of 45 from the Kings. The Kings shot 40% from the floor from three, which honestly isn't like a significant mark there, but they shot 9 more 3-point attempts than the Thunder. And the Thunder only shot 30% from three. That's just not going to get it done. And honestly, that's kind of like the staple of the game here. I think the thing that stands out the most to me, you look at some of the players on the Thunder, 0 of 2 from three for Chet, 3 of 5 from Lou. He has some pretty big threes down the stretch there in the fourth quarter, but ultimately he didn't really space the floor. Shai was only 1 of 5. Dub was 0 of 4. Giddey was 2 of 3. I mentioned some of those big shots that he had. Then you look at guys like that you expect to shoot well from outside. 1 of 5 from Isaiah Joe. Let's see. I don't even really want to get into Bertans because those minutes were just ridiculous. The bench as a whole, let's see, shot 8. Sorry, this is bad math here, but 17 3-point attempts as a whole for the Thunder bench. It was bad all around. The Thunder shot very, very poorly. And then, like I mentioned, on the opposite end of the floor, they let guys like Malik Monk just go absolutely crazy. I think we have to add him on the all team, all NBA Thunder killer list. He went 18 points, 7 of 15 from the floor, but the biggest thing there was 4 of 8 from three. That was just killer for the Thunder. And then De'Aaron Fox, who's been, again, it's been De'Aaron Fox, it's been Shai, it's been Tyrese Halliburton. You can throw in, obviously, Booker and Doncic there, in regards to guards who have been just dominating the league this season. But Fox goes for 41 points, 14 and 25 from the floor, and 5-11 from three. Those guys were just absolutely torching OKC from outside. And the perimeter defense was just really poor for the Thunder. And some of that was due to lamps, which we'll get into. But as a whole, I thought the Thunder really performed poorly defensively, led to a lot of wide open threes for the Kings. Ironically enough, down the stretch, they still were not defending very well from three, and the Kings started to miss some points. And that's when we saw that Thunder miss some 3-point shots. And that's when we kind of saw this Thunder team go on a bit of a run. They were able to get back to what they do best, which is getting stops and then being able to push the floor and push the ball in transition and get those transition opportunities. But ultimately, when the Kings are shooting like that, there's not much you can do. I think about that. What was it? De'Aaron Fox. I think it was I can't remember if it was the second quarter. It was the end of halftime when he came down and just drilled a contested 3-point shot over Lou Dort. Even when the Thunder were defending well, the Kings were just, they couldn't be stopped from outside. They had guys like, I'm going blank now. Oh man, you guys know how bad I am with names. So I'm going to go ahead and butcher this one as well. But Vinskov. Alex Vinskov has some big time 3-point shots there in the third quarter in the second half. And ultimately, that discrepancy right there, like I mentioned, it's hard to compete. It's hard to win a basketball game when you have, when you're not hitting those outside shots and your opponent is. And like I mentioned, there were some incredible opportunities there. Mark Daigneault, I thought, has 2 great challenges. He won both of them. tonight. They're in the fourth quarter. I can't remember who it was that Chet blocked, but they called a foul on J-Dub. I think it was Aaron Fox who was driving to the rim. J-Dub played really good defense, but they called the foul on J-Dub. Chet goes up, gets the block. Again, I can't even remember who the player was now at this point. Really bad podcasting. Mark calls the challenge. He is awarded the challenge. The Thunder get the ball again out of that successful challenge. And then you have 3 consecutive missed open 3-point opportunities. 2 of those were from Chet. Chet had a really poor game, and we'll get into that as well. The other one was from Isaiah Joe, the marksman that we talked so much about early on this season. I tweeted this out from the account, but you live and die by the 3-point shot. And that was the case tonight. This Thunder team is obviously at their best when they have players like that spacing the floor for guys like J-Dub and Shai, and even Josh Giddey when he's playing like the way he is tonight and attacking the rim and being aggressive. And when you don't have that floor spacing, it makes things so tough. And we saw that with the Sacramento Kings playing that trap zone defense that they were playing. That was just like, again, I know I spent a lot of time on that theme, but that was probably the biggest one in the game. And that kind of leads me, I mentioned Dub and Chet struggles, but that's another big theme that I have here. They both really struggled. And obviously the Thunder had Josh Giddey step up alongside Shai, which was significant. And like I said, like looking at Chet's stat line is kind of, I don't know, almost, I don't want to say shocking, but it surprised me when I saw that he had a double-double of 14-11 and 6-12 from the floor, but he struggled. Again, he missed those 2 big 3-point shots from outside. I thought he struggled early on, trying to be aggressive. They were letting him drive and get to the rim, but when the Kings are packing the paint like that, he wasn't getting foul calls. And then defensively, he really struggled as well. We saw Mark go to J-Will early in the first half in both quarters, as well as in the second half as well, because Chet was really struggling with Sabonis. Even though Sabonis didn't like necessarily dominate the game, they wanted a physical big in there to be able to compete with guys like Sabonis, and even like Harrison Barnes crashing the boards. And sorry, I'm looking at the stat line here. Yeah, Sabonis has 16 rebounds. And I don't know. Like I mentioned, I understand Chet. If you look at his stat line, it looks fine. But I thought it was another kind of poor performance from Chet. We didn't see that impact that we've seen here. Even when he's not necessarily performing well offensively, he's had some really big stretches there, especially down in clutch time here the past couple of games. Tonight, that was not the case. I thought Chet didn't really perform well. And then, like I mentioned, J-Dub, probably his worst game of the season. He had 5 points, 2 of 14 shooting, 0 of 4 from 3. Only 1 of 1 from from the free throw line because he got fouled on it and one. Dub really struggled. I thought he forced a lot. He wasn't looking for teammates. Like he wasn't really looking for teammates. And some of that maybe is due to Josh Giddey and him having a better game and kind of controlling the game more. We've talked a lot about Josh Giddey trying to find his fit in this roster, or in this lineup, when you have Chet and, J-Dub taking a leap, and obviously Shai doing what Shai does. Giddey's really kind of struggled with his fit on the court, regardless of the off the court stuff that we, obviously don't really need to get into. It kind of seemed like with Giddey taking a bigger role tonight, Dub really struggled. But like I mentioned, a lot of that was some of the things we've seen from Josh Giddey, honestly, early on in the season, with some of those forced shots and just not really playing to his game. And when you don't have Dub and when you don't have Chet being able to space the floor in that starting lineup, not to mention Lou Dort, not to mention Giddey. And like I mentioned, the guys off the bench not being able to space the floor, like we have kind of become accustomed to, spoiled with Isaiah Joe and others. Like it's going to be very tough to win a basketball game. And so nothing to be too concerned about long-term, but I just think it's worth mentioning that Dub and Chet did not have their best games tonight. And that really kind of hindered the Thunder and their opportunity to be able to win this basketball game, even when Shai is performing at the level that he is. And that kind of leads me to some overall rotation thoughts. I think, like especially in the first half, I loved that unit that Daigneault rolled out there in the second quarter. It was Wiggins, it was Kaysen, it was Dub. I think Chet was in there. I'm going back now. Probably J-Will. No, sorry, it was Kenrich Williams, and I thought they performed really well. The offense struggled, but the defense and just they were getting steals, opportunities, and again, like that kind of leads me to Wiggins. I thought he played really well there in that 6 minutes he got there in the second quarter, but then in the second half, Mark Daigneault goes completely away from Wiggins as a whole, which is really interesting because he was creating when Dub wasn't. He was scoring when Dub wasn't. He was kind of playing that role, that scoring role, that creating for others when Dub was struggling tonight when you have Shai on the bench. And so that's why I find it so interesting, kind of rotation thoughts as a whole. I understand Mark going with a player like Davis Bertans there in the second half, but Bertans was just getting absolutely cooked defensively. He was providing nothing offensively. He was just being smothered offensively. And I can't remember who was guarding him, but I mean, no opportunities for him offensively. And then, and on the defensive side of the ball, he's getting attacked in the pick and roll every single possession. And in fact, there was like 2 possessions there where he was like stumbling into teammates. At one point, he stumbled into Lou Dort, which led to a wide open 3-point opportunity that was made probably by none other than Malik Monk. I can't remember exactly who the player was, but regardless, I thought I understand Mark going with Bertans there to try and space the floor when Thunder had no floor spacing at all off the bench. But I thought he maybe rode Bertans a little too much there. And I think it was in the fourth quarter. And the fact that kind of leads me back to the Wiggins point. Wiggins performed so well there in the second quarter. In those 6 minutes he played, doesn't see the floor in the second half. And I understand there's a lot of different players to get minutes. Oos had some flashes as a whole there, hit some knockdown, catch and shoot threes, which is significant. But again, he still got some minutes in the second half that I would have really liked to see go to Wiggins. And even Isaiah Joe, when he's struggling like he is tonight, why not give more of those minutes to Aaron Wiggins? And those are just some overall thoughts I thought could contribute, or it could have contributed to the Thunder potentially winning this basketball game, especially when you have a guy like Shai playing so many minutes when he's off the floor. Give Wiggins some of those opportunities. It is kind of interesting. I understand it's early in the season. Mark's going to continue to kind of tinker with lineups. Totally understand that. You need other guys engaged. If you can get Bertans going from outside, and if he's good enough defensively, I mean, I understand that's huge, not just for tonight's game, but for the season as a whole. But ultimately, get Wiggins some more time. So those are just kind of my overall thoughts. Some of the big themes from this game. Like I mentioned, I thought the Kings had a really good, this is kind of an aside, but I thought the Kings, after that first quarter, really adjusted to Shai and the Thunder as a whole. They realized, Mike Brown realized that the Thunder weren't hitting outside shots. And so they kind of resorted to that zone trap defense where they were bringing up defenders at the point of attack high, and they were trapping ball handlers. And then they kind of resulted on those back 3 defenders with that size that the Thunder didn't really have to match to be able to hold the line and pack the paint and, just kind of let the Thunder shooters shoot and they weren't making shots. And ultimately, I mean, I thought that was a pretty significant adjustment there from Brown and the Kings as a whole, and really gave the Thunder struggles. And like I mentioned, this is kind of a theme, I think, of this. I guess we're a fourth of the way through the season, but when this Thunder team isn't hitting those outside shots, they aren't spacing the floor, like we've seen them struggle, just like tonight. Ultimately, though, and again, you can look at the plus minus, you can look at the on and off court stats. Obviously, these lineups, when you have spacers like Isaiah Joe in there for Josh Giddey or Lou Dort, or you have Isaiah Joe and Cason Wallace instead of Lou Dort and Josh Giddey, like that lineup of Dub, Shai, and Chet plus shooters is just phenomenal. But when those guys aren't making those shots, it's very difficult. And so that's kind of the theme of this game, right? But the fact that they were still able to make this, like I mentioned, it was a 2-point game there until they started missing some of those 3-point shots after that challenge, and then let the Kings really drive to the rim at will, with De'Aaron Fox particularly. And I think it was Sabonis who had to put back a little bit of a Sabonis revenge game against the Thunder, which seems to be another thing with the Thunder. Former Thunder players really like to perform well when they play against the Thunder. Ultimately, the defense was just non-existent there down the stretch, and that really hurt them. But the fact that they were still able to weather that storm without the floor spacing, they only lose by 5 to a really great team in the Sacramento Kings. The Kings are now 14-9. Thunder are 15-8. Like, this is a really good Sacramento Kings team. This isn't a loss I think that the Thunder fans should be losing sleep over. They had every opportunity to be able to be a really good Sacramento Kings team away, right? Obviously, they weren't playing it all. Like, there's just, I don't think it's worth overreacting to. So those are just kind of my overall thoughts. I apologize for rambling. Like I mentioned, kind of had some technical difficulties here at the beginning of the podcast. And so a little flustered, I think, to begin this one, but still a fun one to break down. Nothing to be losing sleep over. This is another really great learning experience for not only the Thunder, but like I mentioned, even Daignault with some of these lineups. Like, these are things I think we will see correct themselves. I'm really excited for Saturday's game. They will be going to Denver to play the defending champs against the Denver Nuggets. It'll be really fascinating. The Nuggets are now fully healthy again, or I shouldn't say fully healthy. I'm not necessarily sure about their bench, but the main piece there is Jamal Murray. He'll be back there Saturday, and it'll be fascinating to see how the Thunder respond to tonight's game, and not only tonight's game, but obviously that first home game that the Thunder had against the Denver Nuggets, where they just got absolutely blown out. I think this team will respond well, and so I'm really curious and excited to kind of follow along with that one. Like I mentioned, really appreciate all of you guys and gals in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and go through some of these comments, some of these questions, and we'll go ahead and get out of here. Let's see. Shout out. I need. I'm not even going to pronounce that name on the podcast, but first time catching the live action. Really appreciate you being able to tune in and yeah, like I mentioned, these late night games give us opportunity to be able to interact with some of our other listeners who otherwise, like overseas on other time zones, who otherwise wouldn't be able to tune in. So that's really good stuff. He mentioned as well that thoughts on Josh Giddey showing a little flashbacks of his original self. I think I touched on that. Josh was phenomenal. Best game of the season. I think it's pretty obvious. Smoot officially initiates. I thought it said I need coach. It's another term, but Smoot officially initiates him into the degenerates. Let's see. J-Dub has these games way too often. That's from Gargaballs. Another fun name there. He was horrific. He was bad, but I'm not necessarily sure that we should say that he's having these games way too often. Dubs had a really great stretch of games here. He has struggled a bit in comparison to last season, trying to kind of find his adjust to this new role of him kind of taking on a bigger role and leading that second unit, particularly, and then just playing alongside a superstar in Shai. But I'm not necessarily sure that we should say he's been having these games way too often. I think this is a really great learning experience for J-Dub, and I would not be shocked to see him respond really well against the Denver Nuggets. Another really great test for him. They have long, lengthy defenders. It's going to be tough, but I really hope we see J-Dub respond because he's that type of player, obviously from a skill standpoint as well as a basketball IQ standpoint. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Dub have a good bounce back game. Let's see. Smoot with another great comment here. He said, our toughest opponent, zone defense. And that is the truth. Zone defense has given this team a lot of troubles. And we've been seeing that through the past couple of seasons, but really this season, as the Thunder have continued to perform well, teams resort to that zone defense and really make these Thunder shooters prove themselves and hit those outside shots to be able to win the game. Let's see what else. Axel said Tayler will be the first to throw Gidd under the bus regardless of his performance. I've been very harsh on Josh Giddey, obviously, even prior to the off-court stuff, which again, that was kind of my point as a whole with Josh and some of his struggles. I thought he was kind of playing the same way even prior to some of these allegations coming out on X.com. But Josh was phenomenal tonight. I mean, he's the reason. Him and Shai were the reasons that Thunder were even able to stay competitive in this one. I cannot say enough about Josh Giddey's game tonight, and I really hope this is a big pivotal point. Oh. There we go. I lost my mic there for a second. More technical difficulties. Awesome. What a night. But I really hope this is kind of a turning point for Josh in his season, similar to last season, although it happened a little earlier. I mean, like I mentioned, this team is at their best. Their ceiling is at their highest when Josh Giddey is playing at this level, and the other guys are able to, fit accordingly. And then the last one here is from Kaleem. Do you think we have a chance of winning against Denver? I do. I really do. I understand that obviously they're a great team, but they've been having their struggles as well. I'm not going to pull up those stats and go even longer here on this postgame podcast, but I think the Thunder really do have a great opportunity to bounce back against a Denver team. Jokic obviously will have his, especially when Thunder have struggled with bigs. For example, Sabonis, even though he didn't necessarily have a huge scoring night tonight, I mentioned those rebounds. Like, that's something to keep an eye on. But I think the biggest thing against the Denver team is not letting them control the half-court offense, the half-court possessions. And if the Thunder can get those steals, those stops, they can play much better in regards to perimeter defense and get the Denver shooters to be able to miss those outside shots like Michael Porter Jr. and Murray, make those shots difficult for them. Let Jokic eat. It doesn't really matter. Push the floor in transition, get those transition opportunities. I think the Thunder absolutely have a shot there in the against the Denver Nuggets. And let's see. Jokic will have to meet the real MVP. That is right. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, even in a loss tonight, continues to perform at an extremely high level, top 3 in the league, MVP type level. And that's something to be celebrated. And hopefully we continue to see some of his teammates step up, like I mentioned, on Saturday. So thank you all again for tuning in to the Uncontested Postgame Podcast. I apologize a bit there. Like I mentioned, some technical difficulties early on. Obviously, never fun to break down a loss, but I think there's a lot of positive things to take away from tonight. Not worth overreacting. And I hope I was able to kind of communicate that throughout the podcast. Don't overreact. Great opportunity for this Thunder team to bounce back on Saturday. We will have you all covered for that Saturday game, and then we will be back with our group podcast on Sunday night. And it really something I've been thinking a lot about is, like the what was it? Monday night, we play the Jazz. We had 2 nights in between before we play the Kings. We have 1 night in between before we play the Nuggets, but this schedule will be really tough in January. A lot of games that we'll be breaking down. It's going to be really fun as Thunder fans to be able to have those games so close together and not another 2-night gap. It's going to be fun for us, but tough for this team. A really great test kind of moving forward. And so it'll be fun to see how this team responds and really kind of see where this team is. A really great barometer as a whole. But regardless, the Uncontested, we'll have you all covered for all of it. And we cannot wait. So be sure to tune in. Like I mentioned, subscribe to our YouTube, all of our social media platforms, and tune in. We'll be back Saturday night after the Thunder face the Nuggets in Denver. And until then, Thunder up.